Hi, this is Francine Brown, and I'm here with the lovely Tammy Price from the Collections Corner. Today, we've got a real treat, and we're very blessed to have her with us today. Tammy has 20 years of debt collection experience. She has worked for credit card companies. She's collected for credit card companies, for medical, student loans, cell phone, car repossessions, business-to-business debts, you name it, Tammy has collected it. So Tammy today is going to go over and teach us how. We're going to go over how you can kind of negotiate with your creditors, right, to kind of get some headway. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Francine Brown, and my journey started because of different kind of roadblocks that I've come across in my life, right? So that, 6 years ago, it started with a car accident, and then it turned into an accidental overdose by a medical facility, which turned into about a year straight in and out of hospitals, in and out of a wheelchair, using a walker. Then the next 3 years, me working on learning my body and kind of putting myself back together. Through that, though, I accumulated tons and tons of medical debt. I had crutches calling me. I had all sorts of stuff going on. Then I was diagnosed in about 2.5 years ago with stage 3 breast cancer. So you can imagine the medical bills that have accumulated. And I've used some of Tammy's tips to kind of help me negotiate and learn how to get through this without causing stress in my life, because this is Tuesdays, Thrive Tuesdays are about thriving and using tools that are going to help us to get through different roadblocks in our life. So Tammy, I'm going to have you take it over, and please welcome the lovely Tammy Price.
Thank you so much, Francine. And I just have to say, this is amazing. Thrive Tuesday really sums up what we were really called to do in life, which is to thrive. So I want to say thank you, Francine, for being such an advocate for everyone who has the ability to jump in and learn from these videos that you're going out of your way to do. It takes a very unique, special kind of person to want to pour into people, to help equip people to, nobody ever asks for medical debt. It's not like buying a TV and saying, oh yeah, I'll pay for the heart attack. I'd love to have, a stroke on my bill, and let me add, just the car accident, I'm good with 13,000. That sounds great. No one ever asked to be in medical debt. Nobody, and student loans, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah, same thing with car repossessions. There are so many things that happen behind the scene. So like you shared about you, I'm going to share just a little bit about me so that people can understand. 20 years of being in the debt collection industry teaches you some things, both good and bad. I was that debt collector who thought I had to beat people up. I was the debt collector who used to lie, manipulate, use fear to scare people into paying their bill. The reason why I do Collections Corner and why I do my videos that I do and why I'm so passionate about equipping people is because I'm repenting for the idiot that I was back in those 20 years of doing collections. And I want to throw this out there. Not all debt collectors are bad. There are some awesome, good-hearted people out there doing collections. But unfortunately, that wasn't me. So I do these to be able to give back. I want to equip people because, again, you don't know what you don't know. So my heart and my desire is that you would benefit from my experience, that you would benefit by plugging into these videos that Francine is going out of her way to do to really equip you so that you're not taken advantage of, so that you remain ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve, so that you rise above instead of getting squashed below. So that being said, I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to share. This is foundational. So what it means is this. I'm going to teach you in layers because we're going to be doing these things as an ongoing thing. And so what that looks like is today I'm going to talk about very, very foundational things. Next month, we're going to build on that and take you even deeper. So what we're talking about today, it's kind of like making a cake. This is a bottom simple recipe. Next month, we're going to add more layers into that recipe. We're going to show you a different approach and be able to take it from there, because this is about strategy. If you have a really strong strategy and you understand, you can apply that strategy in so many different places. So this is really about equipping you so that you can rise up and not be afraid to answer that phone call when you get someone as a debt collector on the phone. And you know what? It might have been someone like me. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they've got a quota to meet and you're just the poor, unfortunate person who picked up. There's no reason to be afraid. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to give a little disclosure that I always give when I'm talking to people, and that is this. I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. I don't play one on podcasts. So every piece of information I give you, do your research. Verify, verify, verify. Always protect yourself, because knowledge is power and knowledge is protection, especially when you own that knowledge and you can go forward and figure out how best to apply it in your situation, because everyone's situation is unique to them. So that being said, number one thing to know is when you're dealing with there are first party and third party collection agencies. What does that mean? First party works like this. You sign up for a credit card with Discover. You fall past due. Discover card calls you. That's considered a first party. You pay directly to them. When you fall far enough past due, what happens is Discover card says, okay, anyone who is, let's say, 180 days or more past due, we're going to contract out to a collection agency who is going to act on our behalf. They're going to be our right hand reaching out to the people, so that frees us, Discover card, up to continue working with the newer people, signing on people, whatever we do to keep the money coming in for new credit cards, right? So that third party, that other agency that's contacted, that's a third party agency. Sometimes debts are contracted between the two. Sometimes when it's to the benefit of a company just to sell the debt outright for pennies on the dollar to a third party agency who will pay for it. So you always want to tip number one, verify first. When you get a dunning notice, meaning, hey, Francine, you're past due, you owe X amount, we're acting on behalf of Discover card, contact us immediately to set up to pay this in full. You always want to make sure you verify in writing, have it verified for you, the validation of the debt, especially when you get a phone call. There's so much fraud going on out there, and I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying this to equip you. You are never wrong for asking for validation of the debt, and that should be done in writing. I'm a wired skeptic by nature, so I always, you could read off the massive charges that I had on a credit card, or why I went to the hospital or whatever, but I am always going to ask for it in writing to protect myself. That way I can also review and make sure the billing is correct, or that I know, hey, you know what, you couldn't send it to me, so you're not someone I'm going to work with. I'm going to call directly to the company that I owe the money to, whether it's a medical, student loan, credit card, cell phone bill, whatever. So verify, verify, verify. The second thing to know is there are a set of laws that protect the consumer as well as the collector. These are called FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. There are federal laws and there are individual state laws. You want to verify what your laws are for your state, and these are based on the state that the consumer currently lives in, not where the debt was originated. Especially like if you move, right, if you move from California to Arizona, it's good to know the difference between the two, because the state law is always going to supersede the federal law. The federal law is just kind of a generality. The state law is always going to be very specific to how things operate. So in Massachusetts, back when I was doing collections, you could not write a post-dated check. It was illegal for me to ask you for a check dated out. Now, I don't know if that's the case currently, so this is why I'm saying verify, verify, verify. FDCPA, if you Google it, it'll take you to a place where you could type in your state and look up the laws that are specific to you.
Now, Tammy,
Yeah.
Sorry, on the FDCPA, does that include like a medical bill? Like here in Florida, and again, like what Tammy's saying is verify, it was only 5 years that they could collect on that medical debt. Otherwise, you know, it went away. Like they couldn't try and collect on something after 5 years. Is that part of the FDCPA?
So I forget if when you do FDCPA, they would have a section called statutes of limitation. So what Francine is talking about is a statute of limitation. What that means, there are both verbal and contract. So like if Francine and I, let's say we make an agreement that I'm gonna do X amount of work for Francine and she's gonna pay me $800. And so we make this agreement, it's verbal, there's nothing in writing. That's a verbal agreement. You sign something, such as a sign-in for medical services, your loan for your car, your student loans, that's a contractual agreement. Depending on what state you are in, it will depend on the guidelines of how you are responsible for that in terms of how long someone has to pursue you for collections. One thing to consider is when you make a payment on something, so let's say that the statute was over, right? So all of a sudden now, 10, 20 years later, you have a collection agency calling you and you choose for whatever reason to make a payment. That statute starts over again.
Yes. Even if you are on the phone with them and you acknowledge that that debt is yours, it starts over again, correct?
That again, you want to verify what the state laws are. I know when I was doing collections and someone said, yeah, although with what I did, they weren't old enough to be out of statute because I worked the setup that we had. But I've heard stories, horror stories of people getting called with bills that are like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And again, there may be some states that that's still legit. Meaning that it's not out of statute. But again, this is why I always say verify for your state what your statute of limitation is, because knowledge is power. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, awesome. So then the other thing you want to do is when you're going into work with whether it's a debt collector, a third-party agency, or the primary first-party agency, meaning the entity the bill was incurred with, you want to know your budget. And the reason why is this. Back when I was doing collections, we were trained that if someone offers to pay $50, they could really pay $300 or $400. And that's just the way we were trained. So it's not saying that you as a consumer are lying to us. It's not saying that you were trying to hide your money. This is just the way we were trained. So when you run your numbers, you do your budget, it's going to equip you that you know your absolute most that you can afford while realistically covering all your other expenses and everything else you have to balance. So you want to really know your numbers. This way, when you call them and they try to talk you up, you know what? I'm so sorry, Francine, the most I can afford is X amount. So that being said, certain agencies have a setup where they cannot, their computer system just can't process a payment unless it reaches whatever that amount is they're telling you. That's okay. You can still send in your payment and it goes something like this. You know, Francine, I'd love to work with you, but the minimum amount that according to my system says it has to be $250. So Francine would say, no problem, Tammy. What is your mailing address so that I can still send in my X amount, my $50, to go ahead and honor and show that I want to take care of this. And then I would need to give Francine that mailing address.
Now, what about when, I'm speaking from experience here,
yeah.
when you have somebody on a collector on the phone and they say, yes, the minimum is $250 and you ask for the mailing address so that you can send, you know, $10, you know, whatever it is that you can afford, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, I'm sorry, we will not be able to accept any payment that is not $250.
Thank you so much, Francine, for telling me that. Can I talk to your supervisor? I need to get a mailing address, please.
So just stick to the guns, because as long as they're receiving payment, they can't go further with collection, correct?
It depends again on the contract and all those things. So what I would always refer people to do is this. You can be told anything, by a collector. Unfortunately, we would hope that they would be ethical. We would hope that they wouldn't use scare tactics. We would hope that they'd be honorable and really take time to hear what you're saying. Not always the case. So my way of protecting myself is to make sure that I write down and I take copious notes and I keep a file on it. I document the time I called, who I spoke with every time. I document if I had to have a supervisor, name of the supervisor, what we spoke about, and I keep a file. So it looks like this. When I negotiate a payment plan, if they reject it, they say, you know, I'm so sorry, $250 is the minimum we can accept. Awesome. What is your mailing address? I've never had anyone not give me a mailing address. I have had them say, hey, you know what, your payment will be noted, but it's not going to stop collection process. That's fine. That's okay. And the collection process, oftentimes my experience with that has been, it just means they're going to keep sending me a letter saying I'm in collections. It just means that they're going to continue calling me saying, hey, can you increase your payment? That continuing collection process can mean anything. And so a really powerful question to ask when they say that is, okay, well, what does that look like? What does your collection process look like? If you get someone who says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and escalate the collection process, awesome. Well, what does that mean? And don't be surprised if they try to skate around the question. From my training, unfortunately, that usually means that it's just a fancy word for we're going to keep calling you, we're going to keep sending you the little letters in the mail, we're going to try and get you to increase your payment. Very rarely have I been in a situation where there was a lawsuit. So because it's going to cost whoever's filing a lot of money to actually go through with legal process, and usually that's not done unless like employment's been verified, unless there's depending on the state setup, a bank account that can be levied or something like that. So that's not something that I've come across very often. And I'm not sure if it's just because the kind of stuff I collected on didn't warrant it or the kind of balances or what. I just know that that kind of stuff does happen. So my favorite question is, well, what do you mean by escalation? What do you mean by further collection process? This way, they have to tell you, they cannot simply threaten you with legal action unless they're actually going to follow through with it. So know that when you're dealing with a third party, they have to follow through if they're going to say it. And again, this is why keeping a file is so important, because it will protect you in the long run, especially if you're dealing with less than honest agencies. The other thing too is if they call you, they have to warn you that they're calling on a recorded line and that the call may be recorded or monitored for quality assurance if the state guidelines allow for recorded calls to take place. I can't remember because it's been too long, but I know there are some states where you don't have to give that disclosure. I can't remember if it's California or I just don't remember, but look up your state laws in terms of that as well, so that will protect you as well. Knowing that if you're dealing with a third party agency, they must give what's called the mini Miranda, which sounds something like, this is an attempt to collect a debt from a debt collector. Any information obtained is used for that purpose. This is a debt collector. So they usually, well, they're required within the first 25 to 30 seconds of the call to give that statement even before they go deep in conversation, and they have to verify that they're talking to the correct person. Someone can't call Francine and start unloading all this debt information about her brother if her brother didn't give the agency permission to talk to Francine about his bill. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, like, and I've noticed I'll get phone calls. My last name's Brown, so I get phone calls for Christy Brown, Jackie Brown, Susie Brown. Oh, you're related, and I already know, they're trying to find somebody for a collection. Yeah. And so it's amazing because so much can be done now with the internet and finding relatives and.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll even use social media like Facebook and Twitter and where everyone's common communities to be able to do that sort of thing. It's called skip tracing. So they skip trace someone where maybe a number was bad, maybe they got return mail back from an address after they tried sending out a notice to collect. So there's a lot of that.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's why knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Knowing your social media setup so that you don't have random people reaching out to you is a really powerful thing. Even making your setting on your Facebook so that they can't see your friends. This is also a really cool thing to do to prevent the desirability for hackers trying to hack your account and stuff. They usually, my understanding of that is they do that because they see how many friends you have, and that's other accounts they can hack or reach out to acting as you. So, and changing your password frequently. There's a bonus tip.
Yes.
So
On all
yeah.
your accounts, not just Facebook.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. So with the let's go back here with the budget, knowing your numbers, putting everything in writing. If they're going to accept a payment plan, I'll also ask them, hey, can you send me something in writing so that I have something to reference for the agreement that we just made, that you're going to accept my X amount per month toward my bill of X amount for this debt. I've never been told no. They're usually really good about that. I say that because most recently I had some unexpected medical debt where I had to do that prior to getting it paid off. I worked out a payment plan with them and I worked out a settlement. So, which was really cool.
So I had it one time where it was kind of crazy. It was something that it was AT&T. Okay, and I don't know what happened, but something wound up in collections. I didn't owe the money to them or anything, but it was almost easier just to pay it, just to kind of get it off, and then go after AT&T to get the money, because it was a nightmare, you know. And so I said, well, I want a letter from you stating that you're going to take this off my credit, or, you know, for paying it. Oh yeah, just send the payment and we'll take it off your credit. And I said, no, unless I get that in writing, I'm not going to send this in, because I'm going to have to go in now and go after AT&T for this money. Right? So, you okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, so I couldn't get that letter. And then I was like, well, you're not getting the money.
Yeah. So again, getting everything in writing, super smart way to go. Especially when you pay off balances, you do a settlement, which means to pay less than what's owed, as an agreement to resolving the debt. So, and we'll talk more about that on a future episode.
Awesome. I'm so excited. This is awesome information, Tammy. Like, seriously, thank you. This is amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you again for having me. Thank you for tuning in. You could be spending your time doing anything, but instead you're here on Thrive Tuesdays to be able to learn, to be able to grow, to be able to thrive and empower yourself to live the life that you are called to live. And again, thank you, Francine, for coordinating this and having me on. It's a privilege to work with you.
Oh, Tammy, my gosh, you are a dynamo. You are so amazing. You have a way of articulating all this information that sometimes can overwhelm us. And thank you. So do you have any tips where somebody can kind of get started before our next, before you go again next month on the next episode?
In terms of getting started with?
Maybe handling some of the collections that they currently have.
Yes, go. What you want to do again is get your budget, know what you can afford. Look up the, if you're dealing with third party or first party, there are different rules that revolve around both under the FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That way you know what you can and can't do. Look up your statutes of limitation. So that way you know, depending on how old the debt is, it may have fallen off, or, you know, they may still have years to collect on it, knowing what you can do there. And that's where I would start. And then don't be afraid to call to, whether it's the collection agency after you verify it, you've got validation in writing that the debt is owed. Getting that in writing, you have that in hand. Now you're ready to call, whether it be the collection agency or the actual first party where the debt was generated, and then working out your payment plan from there, because you know your budget, you know what you can afford, you know what you cannot afford. And that's where I would start. And then just, of course, get your payment plan agreements in writing to protect yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And so we will every Tuesday at 6 o'clock Eastern, we're going to go live with Thrive Tuesday to bring you information to help release stress in your life so you can thrive in every aspect, financially, stress, health, oh my goodness, relationships, just keeps going. But anyway, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. And Tammy, thank you again. You're a blessing. And have a great day, everyone.
Bye.